So today we're going to talk about the Baha'i faith. It is the youngest of the world religions, but it is growing very, very rapidly. You may not have heard of the Baha'i faith. I did some research today and looked, and the Facebook page for Baha'i of Atlanta has 1,500 followers. That's not a giant number, but you're talking about just Atlanta and just that follow the Facebook page. So it could be significantly more. And again, we're talking about just in Atlanta. The religion, as we'll look, it began as an offshoot of Islam in the 1800s. And so it is even younger than Jehovah's Witness or Mormon teaching. And as I was looking, one of the sources I had is from 2014, said that there were about 5 million Baha'i worldwide. And the current 2020 estimate was 7 to 8 million. And their website has over 8 million. So that's a very small number, comparatively speaking, but it's growing giant, right? At this rate, there's going to be 20 million in just 5 years or something, right? I mean, it's growing very rapidly. And as we go through the study, be thinking of the things pertaining to God's nature, God's works, God's words, and God's people. Those are the 4 markers that we are using to identify false teaching and false cults. So, introduction and history. Again, it's the youngest of the standalone religions of the world. It was founded by, again, one of y'all asked me how to pronounce Baha'i, and I said it's kind of hard to pronounce, if you read it, but we got several names and words to pronounce today, so I'm going to try not to butcher them myself. So it was founded by Mirza Hussain Ali Nuri, who lived from 1817 to 1892, and he was given the title of Baha'u'llah, and he is like the primary teacher of Baha'i. And Lori, did you have something?
No.
Okay. Looked like you did. Yeah, I pronounced it 500 times and I still struggle. Baha'u'llah. And that name means the manifestation of the glory of Allah. So we're talking about Hussain Ali. That's what he went by. And then his name was changed to Baha'u'llah, which means the manifestation of the glory of Allah. Of course, Allah is God. It's the Arabic word for God. So generically, it is the manifestation of the glory of God, but it's an offshoot of Islam. So that is what it is. So he is regarded by the Baha'is as the most recent in the line of messengers from Allah. Baha'u'llah claimed to be he whom Allah will manifest. He is considered to be divine in the sense of a divine incarnation type deal. He's considered to be divine, and no one has the right to oppose him. We could close right now and say, that's a cult. If you have no right to oppose the leader, that's a cult. In the Encyclopedia of Religion and Ethics, the essence of being a Baha'i is boundless devotion to the person of the manifestation and a profound belief that he is divine and of different order from other beings. And again, to see the numbers there, in the 50s, there were around 200,000. And by the late 80s, there were over 400 million. By the early 90s, 500. So, 4 million and then 5 million. So they're growing very rapidly. They believe that all previous religions had lost their spirit, and so there needed to be a revival of the truth of true religion. There needed to be a new enlightenment, and someone new to enlighten the world, someone new to get the world religion back on track. Again, okay, now we could stop. We've got a cult, right? The great cycle that began in Adam, they believe Adam was the first and was a prophet, The great cycle that began in him had reached its culmination in Hussein Ali, the Baha'u'llah, who was the founder of the faith. And so to understand Baha'i, we have to understand a little bit of the nature of Islam, because Baha'i it's a cult offshoot of Islam, but it's also a cult of Christianity as well. It's just a cultish religion. So Baha'is would like to think of Baha'ism as a universal faith, but it is considered to be an offshoot of Shiite Islam. So there are two main branches of Islam, which we didn't talk about 3 weeks ago: the Shiites and the Sunnis, and then offshoots of each one of those as well. But the Shiites, there's fewer of them. There are more Sunnis than there are Shiites. But the Shiites held firmly to the belief that their leader, who was the Imam, must be a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad and must be nominated explicitly by his predecessor. So what Islam, especially the Shiites, believe is that Muhammad appointed the first Imam, who was going to be the first leader of Islam. And in Shiite doctrine and teaching, there are 12 Imams. And they're actually listed. I didn't list them for you, but there are a total of 12. And they all lived, immediately after Muhammad. They proceeded over the next century or so, century and a half, however long it was. And they believe that there are 12 Imams. But the last Imam is believed to have mysteriously disappeared as a child at about 5 years old in Iraq after the death of his father in the year 873. So this 12th Imam vanished. And the Shiites believe that he is hidden by God. Maybe he's still alive on the planet, maybe hidden somewhere with God somehow, and that he will come back at the end. This 12th Imam will come and restore true religion, will come and make Shiite Islam the world religion, and will wipe out all other religions. That is the belief of the Shiite Muslims. They believe that this 12th Imam, who is called Imam Mahdi, was given the titles Lord of the Age and the Proof of Allah, and again is still alive and will appear again on the earth. And so Shiites, they look for the appearance of this hidden 12th Imam. They believe that all the former prophets and Imams will return also to help aid this Mahdi, which it means the guided one, the Imam who is the guided one, Imam Mahdi. And he will bring, again, all oppression to an end and will fill the earth with justice, and only Shiites will be found on the earth. So we have to understand that Islamic background for the Shiite Islam. Next, we're going to see, your next heading is the manifestation of the Bab. The manifestation of the Bab, because now we have to see, okay, we understand Shiite Islam, how do we get to the Baha'i faith now? So a man named Sayyid Ali Muhammad, who lived from 1820 to 1850, he died at 29 years old, became known as the Bab, which is the Arabic word for gate. And he was born October 9th in 1820 in Iran, and he was a descendant of the family of Muhammad. And as a young man, he took a pilgrimage to Baghdad to see the shrines of the Shiite Imams. So there are 12 shrines there, and he took a pilgrimage to see them. And while he was there, he spent some time in deep meditation and prayer and came to the conviction that he was called and chosen by Allah to bring a special message to mankind. So you have all this anticipation, this looking out for the 12th Imam. Where's the 12th Imam? There's a guy over here who's kind of being prophetic. Is he the 12th Imam? There's this anticipation for this hidden 12th Imam. And at the age of 24, Said, who became known as the Bab, he made an historic declaration that he was the gate of Allah and that he was greater than anyone who preceded him. You can think of the Bab kind of in the sense of a John the Baptist thing, like a forerunner thing. Now, he didn't begin teaching that that's what he was specifically, but he began, we'll see later, he became like relegated to that. So he kind of saw himself as the special person, but then it led to the Baha'i faith. So he was imprisoned, and his followers, while he was in prison, his followers were busy traveling around the country and calling upon the Shiites to accept him as their long-expected Mahdi. So that's who they think he is. They think he is this 12th Imam who has come to bring the world under Shiite Islam rule and bring about world peace. One of the Bab's followers was a young man named Hussein Ali that we mentioned earlier, who was had the name a nobleman, and he was given the title Baha, which means splendor in Arabic, and later called himself Baha'u'llah, which means splendor or glory of Allah. So the man given the name by his dad was Hussein Ali, and later he calls himself Baha'u'llah. He calls himself the splendor of Allah, or the glory of Allah. And those who follow him, those who followed him, became known as Baha'i. So they were Baha'i because they followed Baha'u'llah. They followed the one who was the splendor and glory of Allah. So who is Baha'u'llah? Let's talk about him a little more. Again, in Arabic, it's the manifestation of the glory of Allah. He was born November 12, 1817 in Iran. In 1844, when Sayyid Ali Muhammad declared himself to be the Bab that we just looked at, he declared himself to be the gate of Allah, and he proclaimed the arrival of the great day of Allah that was awaited by all religions. This man who became Baha'u'llah, Hussein Ali, he became one of his most active followers. So you've got this new cult, right? You've got the Bab, and now the Bab has one of his most active followers is the one who becomes the founder of the Baha'i movement. So just to make sure we're all tracking there, because we're saying a lot of names and jumping around a little. So Hussein Ali, or Baha'u'llah, became one of the most active followers of the Bab. The followers of the Bab became known as Babis. So you're following followers of Christ are Christians. Followers of the Bab are Babis. Followers of Baha'u'llah are Baha'is. The Babi movement swept through Iran, and it stirred intense persecution, as something like that would. I mean, we're not for either one of the religions. We're not for the Babis, the Baha'i, or Islam, right? But if you've got a whole nation that's Islam, and you've got a cult offshooting from that, they were really pressed against and fought against, and they were persecuted pretty heavily. Many were actually killed. And actually, to go back and talk about those 12 imams, they all, the first imam, I think was killed with a dagger. The second one of the other 10 died after battle, and all the rest were poisoned. All of the rest of the imams were poisoned. And then the 12th imam, of course, was hidden, never poisoned, never martyred, but hidden by Allah. Didn't want to run off and forget that. But in 1852, Hussein Ali, he was cast into a dungeon known as the Black Pit. And he spent 4 months in the Black Pit. Again, he was cast there due to political/religious persecution. It all contributed to it. But he spent 4 months there, and it was there, that pit is the birthplace of what becomes the Baha'i movement. Upon his release, Baha'u'llah was banished from his native land, and this was the beginning of 40 years of exile persecution where he was banished from Iran. And he spent 2 years in the wilderness of Kurdistan during this time as well. In 1856, he returned to Baghdad, where his reputation as a spiritual leader spread throughout the city. This is where he'd taken that pilgrimage that time. His reputation was spreading pretty fast because of this imam anticipation, this religious anticipation. And then for 12 days, From April 21st to May 2nd of 1863, him and some of his, the Bab and some of his followers, let me see, I'm going to read it, I'm going to get tongue twisted. In a garden on the banks of the Tigris River, Baha'u'llah shared with the Babis, because he was one of the Babis, right? Shared with the Babis that were with him that he was the promised one foretold by the Bab and by all the world's scriptures. He says, I'm the one that all the world's scriptures have prophesied about. And this garden became known as the Garden of Rivdin. And Rivdin means paradise in Arabic. And the anniversary of these 12 days is a celebrated Baha'i holiday, and it's known as the Rivdin Festival. May 3rd, 1863, Baha'u'llah rode out of Baghdad on his way to the imperial city, Constantinople, and he was accompanied by family and selected companions. So he left the circumstances were unique. So it's like they wanted him out of there, but rather than just like kill him or execute him or something, they sent him, like, let him be their problem. We're going to send him to the imperial city and they can deal with him. So that's kind of how he left. So it was almost like a sense of prestige for him, but they were really running him off. They're really just trying to get him out of town. And after 4 months there, he was sent pretty much as a state prisoner to modern day Adrian. During the 5 years he spent there, his reputation continued to grow, attracting the interests of scholars, government officials, diplomats, religious leaders, all of that, because he was making such big waves. And then beginning in September 1867, this was a big moment here. Beginning in September, he wrote a series of letters or like epistles to all the world leaders, to presidents and kings and queens and dictators and the Pope. The Pope got a letter from Baha'u'llah. And in these letters, he openly proclaimed that he was the splendor of the glory of Allah. His family arrived as exiles to Akka in August of 1868, and he spent the rest of his life, about 24 years, there and in that surrounding area. Kind of like as a prisoner, but on a short leash. And after a short time, he was actually allowed to go outside the city walls where he could meet with some of his followers and teach and do that kind of stuff. His most important work was written while he was in Akka, and it's commonly known among the Baha'is, and I'm going to try to pronounce it just for the fun of it, by its Persian name, Khatbul Aqdas. Someone say, great job, Pastor. Great job. Awesome. I thought I did good. But it's the most holy book, and he wrote it while he was there. And in it, Baha'u'llah outlined the essential rules and principles that are to be observed by his followers, and this laid the groundwork for the whole Baha'i administration, the whole framework for the religion. And late in the 1870s, he was given the freedom, this is what I said a moment ago, to move outside the city walls and meet in relative peace with his followers. And he passed away May 29th, 1892. And his remains were laid to rest in the garden room next to his mansion, which has the name of the mansion translates to the word joy. And for Baha'is, this is the most sacred place on earth. Is the place where Baha'u'llah has been laid to rest, the most sacred place on earth. So we've learned about the Bab and Baha'u'llah. So now let's look at Baha'u'llah's son. He was born as Abbas Effendi in 1844 and lived to 1921. Again, this is a very young religion. He was Baha'u'llah's eldest son by his first wife, and he was appointed by Baha'u'llah to be the successor, to be the one to kind of take up the reins and run with the religion. And he was, and today is held by the Baha'is as the one authorized interpreter of the Baha'i teaching. He's the only one authorized to interpret it. And it's already been done. There's no new interpretations, right? So he's the only one authorized to do this. And he was the head of the faith after the death of Baha'u'llah. And he assumed the name, of course, they always got to change their names, right? That's kind of like what the popes do. Right? They always take a papal name. He assumed the title of Abdul Baha, which means the servant of Baha, being the servant of Allah. And he also called himself the center of the covenant. That's the way he spelled it. I went with that spelling. The center of the covenant. And he was completely devoted to his father's teaching, to his mission, his suffering, his teaching, everything he did. He was completely devoted to it. And he was imprisoned in Akkad for a total of about 40 years. So he spent a long time imprisoned. But when he got out, he was released in around 1908. He started traveling and he reached Europe in 1911 and America in 1913, proclaiming the message of the Baha'i faith. So he came over here in America, wherever he landed, wherever he came, and proclaimed the faith of the Baha'i religion in 1913. So that's when Baha'i reached America. 112 years ago or something. Very, very recent. He wrote that he was the interpreter of all the works and books of the Blessed Perfection, and therefore no believer has any right to criticize. This is a cult. We can be dismissed today. And he died in 1921, and thousands gathered on Mount Carmel to mourn his death. And after his passing, the leadership of the Baha'i movement took on a new phase, because instead of passing to one person, it was passed to a group of people, a body of people, a community known as like an administrative order. And Abdul Baha's grandson, Shoghi Effendi, was designated guardian of the Baha'i faith, and his main task was to appoint the Universal House of Justice, which became the supreme authority over the Baha'i community. Effendi had no authority to alter any of the teaching. You know, he was the great-grandson of Baha'u'llah, right? No authority to alter any of the teaching, but he did bring some clarity, some clarification. Maybe kind of in the court system, what we would see case law, kind of clarification to some of the teaching that wasn't clear. But he brought supposedly no new teaching, and had no authority to change anything. Now we see the Universal House of Justice that we just mentioned. It was commissioned by Baha'u'llah, but never started by Baha'u'llah. And it didn't come into existence until 1963, mere 60-something years ago, right? And it has legislative, judicial, and administrative function through a 9-member body that is elected for 5-year terms. So it has it's a religion with a leadership head and a body, and it governs the Baha'i faith. The House of Justice inherited both the position and the spirit of the infallible guardian of the faith, and considers representatives of Allah as divine agents. Your next heading, there is the Baha'is International Center. The Baha'i World Center is established in Haifa. Is that Haifa? I know someone can pronounce that I can't. It's in Israel. I thought someone would know that. Haifa. Okay, well, I'll go with that one. I didn't check that one. Haifa. It looks like Haifa in English. It certainly does, but I didn't know. In Israel, which is the location of Baha'u'llah's exile in 1868, and the location of his death in 1892. So the headquarters for the Baha'i religion is actually in Israel. Yeah, it's a wild thing to think about. It is the site of the faith's most sacred shrines, the resting places of both Baha'u'llah and the Bab. And it is the seat of the international governing body. So, the Babi and the Baha'i scriptures and customs. We have the Bible as our scriptures. We saw Mormonism has 4 sources. They've got the King James Version Bible as they want to interpret it, the Book of Mormon, Doctrines and Covenants, and Pearl of Great Price. So every religion has their own scriptures. Well, they have theirs. They have one that's called the Baha'i, which means declaration. It was written by the Bab. And in the Baha'i, he explains the principles and customs of the Baha'i community. One of the things that's described in this is the division of the year into 19 months of 19 days, which comes to almost a year, like 361 days or something. And that comes through the Baha'i where this is taught. And the 19th month is the month of the fast. And immediately following the fast is the ancient Iranian festival. That is the Iranian New Year. And the book, the Baha'i, also describes inheritance rules and many other aspects of social life for the Baha'is. And this writing has been accepted and is authoritative writing for the Baha'i as well. And so Baha'u'llah adopted this, what the Bab had prescribed in the Baha'i, and he also wrote many books and epistles in Arabic and Persian. The most important, we mentioned earlier, the one that's called the Most Holy Book, and it's a book of laws that are ceremonial, moral, civil, and criminal laws. In Baha'u'llah's writings, that is where he kind of lessened the place of the Bab into the place of more like a forerunner, more like a way preparer for Baha'u'llah. The fundamental assertion of Baha'ism is that Baha'u'llah is the manifestation of Allah. Like what's our profession of faith? Jesus is Lord. Well, one of the 3 things that you have to affirm to be Baha'i is that Baha'u'llah is the manifestation of Allah. The Baha'is begin their writings with a phrase, in the name of our Lord El-Baha, instead of in the name of Allah. So again, they're an offshoot of Islam, a cult of Islam, but they're rejected by Islam as well. The 3 conditions to being a Baha'i. First one is accept the Baha'u'llah as the manifestation of Allah. You have to do that. Secondly, you have to follow him in complete obedience. And thirdly, Abdul-Baha added this 3rd condition that came about since the death of Baha'u'llah, and this is that the adherence to Abbas Effendi, who was known as Abdul-Baha, which was the grandson, as supreme head, the center of the covenant. So you have to believe those 3 things to be Baha'i. I'm sorry. It's confusing.
Yeah. So is the center of the covenant saying that he's divine? Or is he saying that he is divine?
I think it'd be more the main prophet, because Baha'u'llah is divine. And Baha'u'llah is the last, well, they would actually say the most recent prophet, most recent manifestation of the divine. So I don't think Baha'ism teaches that there won't be others in the future. I think that they teach that Baha'u'llah is the most recent. And you know who was before Baha'u'llah? The Buddha, Jesus, Moses, Abraham, Zoroastrian. All of these were manifestations of Allah, and they all culminate in, or the next one in line is Baha'u'llah, but there might be others. I think, I won't quote them on that, but I think that's the direction that they're moving. And whoever rejects, even Abdul-Baha, whoever rejects him is cut off and no longer in the kingdom. So you're cut out of Baha'ism at that point. This is, of course, similar to how most cults elevate their leaders, which is why the Baha'i religion is like a cult, really, of both Islam and Christianity. In their ethics, they permit polygamy. They have a strange philosophy of matter. They believe matter to be eternal, which is a real big problem that you just can't solve. If matter is eternal, then matter must be God, but that's something they don't really address. They would probably appeal to mystery. Somehow, all the material universe is eternal and God is eternal at the same time. I don't know. If you ever meet a Baha'i, you can ask them. I'm not sure how they would answer that one. So, Baha'ism is certainly inconsistent with Christianity. A believer of the Baha'i faith would likely say about God that he is impersonal and beyond the understanding of any mortal mind, though we may find expressions of his attributes in every created thing. You can't know him, he's beyond knowing, but you can, I don't know, I might say see his footprints. You can see impressions of him. You know he's there, but you can't really know him. I have a quote from Baha'i.org under their beliefs about creation. He has sent a succession of divine messengers, known as manifestations of God, to educate and guide humanity, awakening in whole populations capacities to contribute to the advancement of civilization to an extent never before possible. And so we know the God of Scriptures reveals himself to mankind in two ways, through his word and through his Son. So we can clearly know God through his word and clearly know God through his Son. And that's how we know God. But the God of the Baha'i can only send messengers to guide us and has no interest in a personal relationship with us, but can only send messengers again to guide us. Baha'ism asserts that the promises and the prophecies given in even the Holy Scriptures that Christians hold to have been fulfilled by the appearance of the Prince of the Universe, the great Baha'u'llah, and of Abdul Baha. So maybe he is the last one. But there's no way that's unfalsifiable, because 1,000 years from now, when another guy rises up and says, I'm better than Baha'u'llah, you can't disprove him, right? Because that's what this guy said. I'm the best one. Okay, well, you look like you had some comments you can give them.
So how do you roll with the prophet?
Yeah. 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 I would never, ever compare Baha'u'llah to Jesus, but Jesus was a prophet. He was also spoken about, also prophesied about. So I think that they would see it that way. Although apparently they've never read the scriptures, because Baha'u'llah does not meet the criteria to be prophesied about. And this might be one of those things that if you meet someone who's Baha'i and they say, hey, the New Testament scriptures, or the Christian scriptures even prophesied about Baha'u'llah, I would want to say, show me where, show me what you mean. Because I like to ask questions when people make claims. I don't like to rebut a claim. I like to get, you defend your claim. You made the claim, you defend it. People don't like to do that. They usually run. But scripture, we know passages probably off the top of our head that warns against such persons. Jesus said, for false Christs, false prophets will arise. If anyone who says I'm a prophet if they can just say it and get away with it, and other people say it and they get away with it, then that's unfalsifiable. You can't prove that wrong. I can say I'm a prophet, deal with it. You can't prove it. Baha'u'llah has no prophecies. He gave no prophecies. He was just a great teacher, right? And then, of course, 1 John 4:1, beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. For many false prophets have gone out into the world. If that happened before the end of the first century, it's going to happen again, right? And even again in the future. And we know, the handful of us in here, we know to accept Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha is to deny and forsake Christ. You can't have both. So Baha'i would say that, well, we'll get to it in a second. We'll get to their main emphasis and teachings in just a moment. But there are even internal contradictions within the Baha'i movement. among their messengers, their own messengers. So there's one epistle. You can find these on the website. God in his essence and in his own self hath ever been unseen, inaccessible, and unknowable. The emphasis is mine. And then they also say, having created the world and all that liveth and moveth therein, he, through the direct operation of his unconstrained and sovereign will, chose to confer upon man the unique distinction and capacity to know him and to love him. Is he knowable or is he unknowable? Their own writings conflict there. So a summary of the Baha'is' beliefs. It's really under three headings. They're monotheistic in that they believe in one God, although the messengers are also divine. Figure that one out. They believe in one God who is unknowable and beyond comprehension, and they believe in one religion. So they would hold to what cults would call progressive revelation, in the sense that for them, what Abraham taught, for them, Abraham was a prophet. What Abraham taught was not wrong. What Moses taught was not wrong. What the Buddha taught was not wrong. And what Jesus taught was not wrong, but they were all stepping stones up to Baha'u'llah. So for the Baha'i emphasize one God, one religion. They say there is only one world religion in different manifestations of that religion. But the ultimate goal is everyone will be Baha'i. But we understand the God of Christianity and the God of Islam are not the same God. We understand the God of Christianity and the God of Baha'ism is not the same God. They would say, we just don't get it. It's really the same God. We're just practicing in this way. That's what they would say, but they're wrong. They believe all of these people, including the Bab, Baha'u'llah, and Jesus, are all divine physicians who came to the world, who were sent into the world, who were raised up in the world at just the right time to address certain situations at that particular time. And so physicians prescribe cures in different ways depending on the situation. Therefore, you have Jesus in his setting and Muhammad in his setting, and Zoroastrian in his setting. And so they're prescribing as they need to. So they emphasize, Baha'u'llah said, referred to this as the changeless faith of God, eternal in the past, eternal in the future. So the faith of God does not change. We're just understanding it more clearly. And they acknowledge there are certainly differences in all these other religions, but they acknowledge the foundational similarities in all the religions, which I would say is not foundational similarities. But you should love people. You should do good. You should not murder. You should be kind to one another. You should value humanity. You should do these good things. I kind of say, so what if every religion teaches that? That's because God has instilled that in us. That does not then make it true that because we have a sense of morality, that this false idol is the true God, right? That just doesn't comport. So there are similarities, but the differences are where it's at. Some people, talk about Islam for about 10 seconds. The God of Islam and the God of Christianity is the same God. My question is, I would ask the Muslim, do you worship Jesus as God? And as soon as he says no, I say, that's the end of it. You and I don't worship the same God. Jesus is either God or he's not God. He's either worshiped or he's not worshiped, right? So it's one of those things. So they believe in one God, one religion, and then one humanity. They say the earth is but one country and mankind its citizens. So they, in their hopeful utopia, I'm assuming they would get rid of even nation borders, nation policies, and there would be one world government, one world system, because we're all equally human. So that's kind of their utopian goal. Socially equal, even economically equal. They want this equality of humanity across the board. They say things like we are one human family and we need to act like it. Okay, we all descend from Adam. That's good advice, but we get that advice from Scripture. We don't need Baha'u'llah or Baha'i to tell us that. So their goal ultimately is to establish a global commonwealth and universal peace. Scriptures, in recap, the writings of Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha, and the Bab. For their practices, they do daily prayer, fasting. They generally avoid alcohol. They think that that's the pinnacle. When they get where they're getting, there'll be no alcohol. So some Baha'i who live in a different cultural, social setting might still drink, and that's allowed because that's the culture, but eventually the culture won't be like that anymore. It's a gradual improvement. So you should not drink, and it's commended if you don't, but it's not forbidden if you do. And they have a huge emphasis on equality in education. I think it was Baha'u'llah that said, one of them said it, I think it was him, that science and religion are like science and religion are the two wings of a bird. You have to have them both to fly. So they emphasize, which we say true science and religion don't, and true religion don't contradict. We also say that, but we don't bend. Like if Scripture says something and some scientist says something else, well, that scientist is just wrong. I mean, I might be understanding Scripture wrong, but if I'm not, that scientist is wrong. But they do that. And of course, their headquarters is in Israel. And they are rapidly growing. And you may have never encountered a Baha'i, but they are around here. And you will sometime. You will encounter one. So now you have a little bit of an overview of